It's kind of a sad thought to sit with, that many of us can't trust our employers to pay us enough to live or pay us on time. I used to think that this was just a me thing, but even in the aspect of like bartending when I first moved to LA, I came to the realization that like most of the people that I was bartending with throughout a company that owned a large array of venues had a high frequency of kind of just forgetting to pay people on time. Um, Terrible notification processes, terrible systems to inform you that you needed to fill out new paperwork, uh, probably because it's like a money laundering scheme a little bit, or they're they're doing something that they're not supposed to do. Who's to say? As I sit in my car, awaiting my next DoorDash order, I sit with the thought that it is a new age of many people that I know don't necessarily trust that their employer has their best interests at heart, and don't necessarily trust that they will always be paid in a timely manner. And my initial response to this was kind of just like, well, that's crazy. Let me see if I can go about like getting them to understand, like human to human, heart to heart, that like, hey, as a person, like I need my income in a stable manner to survive. That didn't work. Suffice it to say, everyone does not care about whether or not you need your income stable. But then my second approach was that obviously what needed to be done then was that I would need varying sources of income in case one was delayed, the other would come in. And if the other would come in, then we'd be good, because then I wouldn't have to worry. They overlap enough to the point where like it may be rough for like 2 days, and then you're back in like good standing for a little bit until you have to pay the next few bills. And like part of this is like the nature of living in LA. Part of this is the nature of work that I'm in. Like it's largely freelance. It's freelance bartending for events. It's freelance assistant work. It's DoorDash. And ironically, the most stable one is the DoorDash, because I know that the income has been made, so I know I just put it in the bank and it's there. There's no delay. There is no interruption. If there is delay, it's like 12 hours. It's not hard to work with. Totally understand how people end up stuck in the cycle of DoorDashing as a full-time income, not only for the flexibility of it all, but because in varying different circumstances, compare my DoorDashing experiences in terms of income instability with like a job that I had at a restaurant or a job that I had working in shipping manufacturing. In both instances, my pay was still delayed. And those are the areas in which you're supposed to go and get stable supply of income. The restaurant job was not tips based. I wasn't a server. The shipping manufacturing job was not tips based. It wasn't waiting to see if somebody would give me enough of a tip for me to be able to continue through life or make it to the next day. It was dependent on literally just, had you made your hours? Great. Okay, well, this pay period is going to be a little delayed by like a week, and there is no compensation for the delay. I hope you guys have it. And at the same time, working at the shipping manufacturing job, I was only making just enough, but it wasn't enough to pay all of my bills. So in response, I then had to supplement the back half of my income with DoorDash. So luckily, when the paycheck was delayed, I was good. I was good, but only good because of the fact that I had already had to work on the back end of my days to support myself. What came of that is that I just ended up with like less time to myself. I'm sure there's like a much more straightforward way to say all of this, to tell you that like uh, income is for a lot of people unsustainable, and that's why people are complaining, and that's why people are in so much credit card debt. If you aren't aware, a lot of people are in a lot of credit card debt. So many people tell me how much credit card debt they're in, and I'm like, what's going on? Wait, what? Because oftentimes people are just living off their credit card in the moment and then fixing the problem later, which is like a hopeful gesture. I don't think we're supposed to live like this. And it's very interesting because I have the fortunate opportunity to have had employers that were good and cared about me and cared about their staff as a whole. And so, even as an example, to come from a bar in Texas where I had been a bartender there for almost 5 or 6 years and have my consistent and literally predictable income, know how many shifts I had to pick up, know how likely I was to make whatever amount of money I needed to make, know that I was going to be paid consistently on time every time, most times, because cash heavy bar or tip cash heavy bar. Most of the times I just get my tips day of instead of on a paycheck, so that they could, because whenever they put your tips on the paycheck, it's just so they can pay less in taxes. I hope more people know that, because more people should know that if you work in the service industry and your tips are on your paycheck and you get everything on a paycheck, it's because they want to pay less in taxes and they're using you to edge out the taxes. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to have a situation like that at a bar. And so, for better or for worse, it taught me, one, that like your employers are supposed to respect you, and two, that like your money should be consistent. But here's the other thing, is that like I also worked in a corporate job. I worked at a corporate job doing social media management, and in the corporate job doing the social media management, there I was also shown, one, that the people who are doing so much labor are doing so much labor. Like that's like it. Like, you're doing a lot of labor. Because I had worked much harder as a bartender than I ever did as a social media manager, in terms of physical labor, but also in terms of like mental load. There was just so much more going on. And this isn't to discredit the work that a social media manager carries, because there is a heavy mental load for social media managers who are really good. But in my case, I wasn't really given much like free creative freedom. And so it was just kind of like, we want somebody who can consistently post these things that we will give them for us. Here's what we'll pay you. And that was it. So for me to have come from like working like labor intensive jobs and then moving into the more corporate seated role, I was like, whoa. The thing about that is, though, the point of this is that these two experiences guided me further in life, in knowing that like your income should be consistent and sustainable. There are just many people who know that they can take advantage of the fact that you only make so much. It's not a foreign, or like it shouldn't be a foreign concept, that your employer would treat you with respect and like decency as a human being. But since I've moved to LA, I have discovered that the opposite is also true. You will often run into people who will try to treat you with disrespect. But part of the thing, though, is that like, because I came from the background that I came from, when moving to LA, I've run into way more situations of management conflict where management is treating me very, very poorly, and without common decency, and my response is stand up for myself. And in standing up for myself, one, the people around me are always often like surprised that anybody would do such a thing. But also the management seems to be surprised that anybody would take that stand for themselves. And to that, I'm surprised myself that anyone would be surprised that people would have like a spine and would say something about a compromise in their dignity. Like that is much more important than like what you think about me at like work. And there should just be a procedure. There should just be a way to go about this. And I'm always very like formal and kind about it, but at the same time, I'm not like nice about it. I'm like stern and I stand up for myself. And I think that's important. I think people should stand up for themselves to their employers when they are mistreating them. And I know everybody doesn't have like the privilege of being able to do that because they have people who depend on them. So when they take that stand, when they take that stride, it's like, if I lose this job, my life will be in detriment. And for me, I'm like, well, my life is in detriment now. If I lose this job, I didn't lose this job for the wrong reasons. I lost this job for the simple notion of standing up for myself. At least for me, that is a noble thing. And all of this is a very long ass conversation about employment. I'm re-engaging and learning that you cannot place your hopes of survival into the hands of another. You must place them into your own, and know who you can depend on. Because I don't want this to be a thing where it sounds like you shouldn't depend on others. You should be able to depend on others. You should be able to lean on others. But you have to keep hold of the thought that, simply put, they may not always have your best interests at heart. Like, HR isn't even your friend. Like, that's the company's friend first and yours third.